All right, well, welcome back, everybody. It has been a minute since I have done just a straight up book review, so I'm very excited to get into this today. I am finally also using the microphone that came with this camera that I use, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. I think it makes me sound very loud and very tinny, so I apologize if my voice is a lot in this video, but I'm learning, as we say here. I'm very excited to review this book today because it is from an author that one of my really good friends really loves. She's been asking me to read this author for quite a while now, and I tend to be a bit of a slacker when it comes to book recommendations from friends and family, not because I don't want to read them, but because I usually have such a long list of books to get through that it takes me a minute to get to them. But there was a new release from this author that my friend loves, and she was begging me to read it with her so that she could have someone to talk about the book with. And she brought me her extra copy, so of course I couldn't say no, and I promised I would kick off the summer with this book. So today I am very excited to review This Kingdom Will Not Kill Me by Ilona Andrews. It's been a minute since I have done just a standard book review on this channel, but if you're new here or if you need a refresher from other videos that I've done in the past, so usually I start with a summary of the story and then I go into my spoiler-free thoughts. I rate the book through 5 categories and then give the overall rating that I have for the book based on those 5 categories, and then I move into some thoughts that include some spoilers, and then we wrap up the video from there. So to start with a brief summary of This Kingdom Will Not Kill Me, this is a newer release from Ilona Andrews, which is a pseudonym for a husband-wife duo that has been writing for quite a while now from what I have seen in my research, which was very minimal, but it looks like they've had quite a few series under their belts. So this is a new release and the first in the Maggie the Undying series. The story follows Maggie, who is a 20-something fantasy reader from our world who finds herself in the kingdom where her favorite book series takes place. She doesn't know how she got there and she doesn't know how to get home, but what she discovers very quickly and unfortunately quite painfully is that she cannot die. She also figures out that she is at the point in the book series where things are about to get really bad really fast, and as she knows what happens next and as she loves this series and she loves these characters, she decides that she is going to do her best to intervene and to stop the destruction that is imminent in this world. So getting into my spoiler-free thoughts, the 5 categories that I look at when I'm reviewing books is character, plot, writing style, setting and immersion, and pacing. I gave character a full star. I really enjoy the characters of this book, and in particular, I really liked Maggie as a narrator. I've said this in the past, but I do tend to struggle with first-person narrators. They're not usually my cup of tea. I tend to prefer third-person limited, especially when there are larger casts like this, but I really liked being in Maggie's head for this book. I was also a little wary going into this because a lot of times I'm a little guarded when there's a female main character at the head of a fantasy series, not because I dislike female main characters, I love female main characters, but because I feel like it is really difficult to get a female main character right, especially in the fantasy genre, which is rather unfortunate. So I wasn't sure what to expect going into this, but I really enjoyed Maggie. She's a very layered character, and she has just enough background experience from her own world to make her a good person to be transported into this world, while she also has enough naivete about being in this world that makes it so that there is natural character growth that happens with her. And while she can be a little stereotypical typically feisty like a lot of female main characters in fantasy novels are, I didn't find it out of character for her, and it A, didn't annoy me, and B, seemed to be underpinned and fueled by her desire for justice and her love for the characters and this world and her desire to see things made right and to not fall into chaos like she knows they are about to. So it comes from a place of deep admiration and love for this world and for these people. It is a very righteous anger and a righteous sense of justice that she has that drives her to do these things, and that does make her a little bit feisty at times, but it's not done in the way where I usually see it, where it's kind of annoying and it comes across as kind of a caricature or a little too tropey. I also liked her perspective because she was a former law student in our world, so the fact that she has been kind of thrown into this like deeply political fantasy where there's a lot of political intrigue and the justice system is a really big part of the story, it made sense that she would have that know-how to be able to operate in the way that she did as part of the story, so I liked that little touch as well. It made her character very believable. There's a lot of characters in this book. It is a very big cast, but it was relatively easy to keep track of who was who. I liked all the minor characters. I felt like each one contributed something important to the story. None of them felt like repeats or extras. Every single time a new character was introduced, it was for a purpose, and I was able to keep track pretty easily of who was supposed to be who and who was doing what. Not always the case, but for the ones that really, really mattered, especially to the plot of this first book, it was pretty clear who was who in the cast, where they were, and what their role was. And the fact that there was such a big cast really contributed to the setting and immersion of the story, which I'll get into later, but the fact that the world felt so large and lived in, it was like character and setting were working together, and I really liked that aspect as well. And the secondary characters are also very layered and easy to like and easy to root for. So like I said before, full star for character. I really enjoyed the cast of this book, and especially Maggie in particular. Moving on to plot, I gave this a 3/4 of a star. While there were some elements of the plot that were a little difficult for me to keep track of, I do think that Andrews presented a plot that had a clear end goal and consistently raised the stakes throughout the story. And the action was exciting to follow, and the main plot was supplemented very well by the subplots that they introduced. Sometimes there was so much going on that I would have a hard time keeping track of where we were at in the story, but that is more my feeling as a reader than their failing as writers. I think because the story is so layered and there are so many subplots going on that feed into the main plot, sometimes I would get a little lost, but they do all make sense and they do all lead towards that end goal. And the plot was intriguing too because Maggie knew what was going to happen, but her influence did change things. So I think there was a good balance of expectation. We know these certain things we are looking forward to, we think they're going to happen, but her actions did change some of those elements here and there, and it was never necessarily clear or predictable the way that her influence was going to alter the plot. So they did a really good job of balancing the fixed plot with the surprises of Maggie's influence. And I also liked that quite a few pieces of this felt like Criminal Minds set in a fantasy world. I was a big Criminal Minds girly through high school and college, so I really enjoyed that element where it felt like we had the typical elements of a fantasy plot, but the investigative nature of what was going on was also really fun to follow. Next up is writing style. I also gave this 3/4 of a star. I think that Andrew's style has a good balance of being humorous and easy to digest while also playing into the usual high fantasy style of being very descriptive and serious, but there were some moments in Maggie's head, sometimes, not always, that just felt a little corny to me, but I think that's just my preference as a reader. I don't necessarily think it was out of character for her, but there were certain jokes or certain things she would say where it made sense for the type of character that she was, but I was kind of like, didn't really land with me. But again, that's more my preference than any failing on the author's part. And that really is a minor complaint. That wasn't a big thing, and it wasn't so frequent that it bothered me as far as the writing style went. I'm just thinking about overall, I'm looking at the entire thing. That was probably the one complaint that I had. I don't have a lot to say here. I liked it just fine. Nothing that I necessarily want to comment on as to the uniqueness or the difference of the style, which is totally fine. It's not that it is a bad style at all. I just think it felt very typical for a fantasy read, which made sense for the story that it was. So 3/4 of a star for writing style for me. Moving on to setting and immersion, I gave this a full star. It was one of my favorite parts of this book. While it could be a little info dumpy at times, again, it really made sense for the plot that was taking place and for the character that we were following. And it was never annoying to read because you were seeing the world through Maggie's eyes. And because we were seeing it through her eyes, there was a great sense of the wonder and the reverence and the awe that she felt as she was describing the way that everything worked. And it was set up in a way where you had the fun background knowledge where this is her favorite book series, this is her favorite world. She's so excited to be there, so she's getting into all like the nitty-gritty details, but you see it through her excitement and her joy at, oh my gosh, I'm actually here. I can't believe this is happening. And I think too, there was a really great balance of wonder and whimsy along with the nitty-gritty reality that was, I believe it's pronounced Caer Torren, but I could be wrong about that, so forgive me if I'm incorrect, because it is a very unforgiving kingdom. It's very realistically gritty. It is rife with political conflict and carefully organized political tension, but taking all that into account, there was also that a sense of wonder present throughout because, again, we're seeing it from Maggie's perspective and she is so excited to be there. So I love that they had that balance between, ooh, this is a really tense, high-stakes fantasy world that we are in, but also it's really cool to be here. And it felt like more of a soft magic system, which I liked for this setup. I liked that we, again, because we are seeing it through Maggie's eyes, we are highlighting that sense of reverence and awe over getting into the rules of how the magic works. It's clear that it's very powerful, but there's not necessarily a lot of details about how it functions, which was fine. I think the meat of the story was more about the political tension tension and about what was going to happen to the kingdom and not necessarily the magic itself, though it did play a role in that. So I liked that it was more of a soft magic system. It also made it really fun to read about because all the descriptions were really, really cool. I really enjoyed the world overall. It was very easy to get lost in and to be swept away by the descriptions of, so it was just a really neat world and I loved getting involved in it. And then next and last is pacing, which I also gave a 3/4 of a star. I think the pacing was great. It has a good balance between high intensity moments and low intensity moments, but all which funnel into the central conflict and the main goal and goals of the overarching plot. It did take me a couple weeks to get through this, and usually I would read something of this length a lot more quickly, but I don't think that is a failing of the pacing so much as it was a reflection of the free time that I actually had to be reading. My routine lately has been trying to read for a bit before bed, and I have been so tired at night that I can only manage like a chapter or two at best before I fall asleep. So it just took me a little bit longer to get through this one. But again, that was more a result of my free time than boredom with the book itself. I do think it felt like a little bit of a slog at the beginning as I was getting used to the world and the characters and the setup. But as I settled into it and I understood the mechanics of the world and what was supposed to be going on, it moved a lot more quickly for me. So I think it had good pacing overall. There were just a few moments that maybe felt a little slow, particularly at the beginning. But again, I think that was just a reflection of me trying to get used to the world that I was in and to figure out what was going on in the story. So all in all, this receives a 4.25 stars from me. I had a lot of fun with this book and I am invested in keeping up with the series as it releases. If you like portal fantasies, political intrigue and drama, large casts of characters with a hefty dollop of whimsy, I would recommend This Kingdom Will Not Kill Me. Now getting into some spoiler-filled thoughts. So if you have not read the book and you would like to, you can go ahead and click away to the end now. But if you have read the book and you would like to discuss a little bit more, you can stick around. I don't have a ton of spoiler-filled thoughts to give here, but I do want to go back to Maggie's perspective because I loved that we had such emphasis on her compassion. The fact that it goes beyond the fact that these are her favorite characters and this is her favorite book and it got her through some really dark times and she just loves this world and this story. I think the fact that she is driven by righteous anger and a desire for justice, which I already mentioned, but I think it becomes so important to her, not just for those reasons, but because now that she's in the world, she starts to genuinely care about these characters because they are her friends. They're the people that she's made herself responsible for. And so I think her sense of duty and her desire to do what is right because she cares was a really refreshing take on this kind of perspective. And her character also made a lot of sense to me. Again, her background with law and her obsession with the series, like it made sense that she figured out quickly how to function within this society. And I also really liked that she was so aware of her feelings, especially for Everard, and that she was so careful about it. Because as much as I enjoy a sweeping romance from time to time, I think sometimes I can get annoyed by those kinds of plots in fantasy worlds, especially with this idea of if we're like a self-insert character like Maggie is kind of supposed to be. I think there can be a lot of like pining and too much time spent on like just drooling over the characters that we're interested in. But I like that even though Maggie was very taken by his characters, she was so aware of this man is supposed to be manipulative. He is using me. I cannot fall for it. And so she was so careful with her feelings and tried to set up those boundaries. And I appreciate that she stood her ground because I think it gives a lot of potential for the growth of their relationship in particular throughout the series. I like that we didn't give into it right away, which I think happens a lot of the time, or I see it more and more often, and it kind of bothers me because I want to have that tension and I want it to take its time because I want to care about these characters and their relationship and not just, you know, the fact that they're attracted to each other. I really liked that the authors took it that direction and that Maggie was so aware of how much she liked him while also being like, but I know what he's like and I gotta be careful and sticking to it. Proud of her for that. And then moving on, I did really enjoy the descriptions of magic in this book. I had so much fun reading about the magic in this world. And I think in particular of the fight between Dames and Isadao. I don't know how to pronounce their names, forgive me if I'm butchering it, but their fight near the end of the book, I remember sitting there reading through those pages and just being so engrossed with those descriptions because it just sounded so epic and so cool. And while I know that's fantasies MO and I read that kind of stuff all the time, something about the way it was described in this book, I was just so taken with it. So I really, really did love the magic system. And in particular, when we were getting into those fight scenes, it just sounded so awesome and I really enjoyed it. And then maybe an unpopular opinion, but while I enjoyed the reveal that Reynold was actually Everard, I was slightly disappointed that it wasn't Reynold after all, mostly because I liked that we were taking the angle of her falling for a more secondary character who was maybe overlooked more often. I I thought that was a really interesting angle, and so when it was revealed that it wasn't actually Reynold and it was Everard, and we were going for more of the, I don't want to say traditional, but the more expected, oh, we're gonna fall for the bad boy type. Obviously, he's more layered than that, but when that took that turn, I maybe shouldn't have been surprised, but I was a little bit disappointed. But I think that makes sense because that's also how Maggie felt at the beginning. She was upset that he had lied to her, upset that he had been concealing his true identity, feeling like she had really come to care about this character that she had read about on the page and then it wasn't him after all, so she felt that betrayal and that grief. So it makes sense that I felt the way that Maggie felt at that moment, but I think there was a small piece of me that was a bit like, oh, but I liked that it was a more secondary character that we were going for here, but so it goes. That said, though, I do appreciate that Everard being the bad guy character and the fact that his MO is being really manipulative and scary. The fact that our first encounter with him on the page is him helping her as a beggar, not for any gain of his own, but just to say, hey, here's some money, get off the streets, do what you have to do. The fact that we get to call back to that early moment of compassion from him that contradicts who she knows him to be, again, adds a lot of layers to the character, and I really appreciated that we took it that angle and that little tidbit was included near the beginning as well. I am also really torn between enjoying the references to our world and finding them a little bit cringy. This kind of goes back into my mild critique of the writing style where some of the jokes just kind of fell flat for me. Most of the time I didn't mind it, but every now and then they would kind of insert a little joke from our world that kind of just made me go, because it felt relevant to this moment in time right now, but I feel like it's not necessarily going to age well, not because it's anything inappropriate or bad, but I think specifically of the scene where she is at the, I'm forgetting the name now, but she's going to meet with the knights, and the really handsome knight comes towards her, and she makes the joke internally of the I'm looking for a guy in finance, but changes the lyrics of that song and that meme, and is funny, but I also kind of was like, I didn't like it. It kind of made me cringe a little bit. So there were little moments of that felt a little bit forced that I didn't love, but generally speaking, the overlap between Maggie's world and the world that she's in worked pretty well. I also found myself thinking about this book a lot when I wasn't reading it, which for me has become a good sign of the fact that I am enjoying a story. My brain tends to get so overwhelmed by to-do lists and things that I'm supposed to be doing, so that if a story is genuinely lingering with me while I'm in the middle of reading it, that means it's got its hooks in me. I'm genuinely invested and I care about it. There are some books where I'm reading it because I feel like I should, or I'm trying to get through it, but I'm not thinking about it outside of the time that I'm reading it. And this book I found more and more as I got into the story that I was thinking about it when I wasn't reading it. So that to me is a pretty solid sign of good storytelling. And overall, I walked into the story thinking I was going to enjoy it, but I didn't have a lot of expectations, but I ended up enjoying it more than I think I was expecting to. So I was pleasantly surprised by that. I overall just had a really fun time, and I'm excited to see what else unfolds from this series, and I'm anxious to read more from this author, not only because it's my good friend's one of her favorite authors, but also now having finally read a book by this husband-wife duo, finding how much I enjoyed it, I'm excited to see what else they have to offer. And that is all for now. This was a great book to kick off my summer with, and I am really glad to have read it. Shout out to Leslie for insisting that I read it with her, because I had a lot of fun and I thought it was great. I don't necessarily have anything scheduled for what comes next, but I have a few things on the docket that I would like to do, so hopefully you will see a reading vlog or a readathon or maybe a writing vlog from me sometime soon. Have a few things in the works that I'm hoping to do, and hopefully not too much longer until I can do them, so more from me on that soon. As always, you can also find me on Instagram and Goodreads. Those links are below, and if you like this kind of content and feel so inclined, you can also hit the subscribe button below. But in the meantime, happy reading, happy writing, and I will chat with you all very soon.